Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In fulfilling the requirement and assessment given by Sir Abdul Majid HAFIZ for peace, conflict and war studies subjects, our group chose to discuss on the conflict of Kashmir. My name is NURALIAH binti JAMALUDDin. My matric number 047911. Before explaining further detail on Kashmir conflict, I will explain a little bit on the historical background that led to conflict in Kashmir. Kashmir remains a source of bitter conflict between India and Pakistan. In May 1999, exactly a year after India and Pakistan conducted nuclear tests, a localized war between the two countries erupted on the disputed Kashmir border near the Indian-controlled town of Kargil. After 7 weeks of fighting, a direct intervention by US President Bill Clinton led to a negotiated agreement for Pakistani forces to withdraw from India's side of line of control, ending the most serious fighting between the two countries. However, the conflict is far from solved. The 50 years dispute over Kashmir constitutes one of the gravest perils for global peace and security. Resolving the Kashmir issue will require restraint from New Delhi and Islamabad, as well as a long-term framework for softening the unreconcilable conflict of loyalty. Peace-building process in the subcontinent seems to be more difficult and tortuous and chronically prone to crisis and breakdown, but still, the cost of not trying to resolve the Kashmir issue is far greater than the cost of trying to prevent it all. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is RUHAN FAHIMA binti RAZALI, matric number 047976. And today I will present to you for the first point under the Kashmir conflict is the Kargil crisis. So, during this Kargil crisis, Lahore Declaration was signed between the Pakistan and India. It is the cooperation and dialogue between these two states on all issues of contention, including the long-standing dispute over Kashmir. So, the declaration was shattered 3 months later by the fierce fighting along a barren mountainous stretch of the 800-kilometer line of control that divides the disputed territory of Jammu and Kashmir into Indian and Pakistani zones. A 1,000-strong force of Pakistani regulars and Islamist guerrillas crossed the divide at about 30 points along a 140-kilometer stretch in Kargil, an area in the sparsely populated Indian-controlled high-altitude region of Ladakh. So initially caught by surprise, the Indians responded on 26 May with airstrikes against the lost positions, along with heavy artillery barrage and a massive build-up of Indian ground forces in the zone of confrontation. So, these diplomatic relations between India and Pakistan touched their lowest point since the War of 1971, and the Chinese Foreign Ministry, also known as Sharif, issued a statement urging both India and Pakistan to earnestly respect the line of control and to find solution to their difference through talks. So on 4th July, Pakistan backed down, and the meeting in Washington, where President Bill Clinton and Sharif stated in a joint declaration that concrete steps will be taken for the restoration of the line of control in accordance with the India-Pakistan Simla Agreement of 1972. As soon as the pullback began, the Indians also de-escalated operations, suspending airstrikes and most artillery shelling. But serious incidents of violence continued to occur. So, here the real lesson of Kargil is that it has become extraordinarily urgent for India and Pakistan to develop a coherent approach to dealing with the Kashmir problem, based on building cooperation rather than provoking and escalating conflict. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name MOHAMED IKHMAL bin ZULKIFLI, matric number 047120. The sources of the conflict, both external and internal factors drive the conflict in Kashmir. Both country has chosen to make possession of Kashmir central to their respective national ideology, which is nationalism in the case of India, Muslim nationalism in the case of Pakistan. Formidable sources of conflict which are internal to Kashmir itself. The typical first preference of a Kashmir Muslim from the valley, the historical center of Kashmiri autonomism, one personified by Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah, the Lion of Kashmir. Along with this social diversity, there are several basic political allegiances. Political preference of the narrow sort, but which national identity is preferred by people as individual, as a member of different community in Kashmir. While most political disagreements are amenable to some sort of resolution through negotiation and also beginning. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Muhammad AZIM NIZAMUDDIN bin MOHAMED 047477. So, for the purpose of referenda, the experience in Bosnia, Herzegovina and Quebec, as well as in Northern Ireland, powerfully demonstrate the problem. The descent into civil war in Bosnia became inevitable the day the result of this referendum became known. So it turned out to be a three-sided civil war since most groups. So combine external and internal factors, and the Kashmir conflict looks almost impossible to solve. To the citizen of Jammu and Kashmir, whose fundamental allegiance lies with India, the only legitimate unit of governance is India, including Kashmir. And to the citizen whose basic identity is with Pakistan, the only legitimate unit of governance in Pakistan. So there is obviously no space for resolving the Kashmir conundrum and within the present framework of 307. So competing and mutually incompatible nationalist claims to its territory and population. And the framework itself needs to be radically modified if there is to be any prospect of progress towards building a viable peace. So this is especially so because each of three maximalized positions on Kashmir suffers from creeping divisions. So firstly is that the Indian commitment to retaining Kashmir as an integral part of the Indian Union on its own terms can only be realized as the history of the second half of the 20th century demonstrates. So by suspending the basic civil rights of the citizens and of Kashmir, largely disallowing their democratic right to popular representation, accountable government and federal autonomy, and when all else fails, setting up a regime of military occupation across large areas of Indian and control Kashmir and unleashing campaign of sustained repression against its population. So for the second is that the maximalized Pakistani claim to Kashmir seems utterly blind to the reality, not only that a significant proportion of the population in Pakistan then control Kashmir may in fact prefer independence as first choice, but more importantly that only a minority in Indian controlled Kashmir wants to join Pakistan. And for the third, the standard of independent line has problem of its own. It lays claim to the entire territory of pre-1947 Jammu and Kashmir. So the encompassing both Indian and Pakistani controlled portions for its putative independent state. But the ideologues of independence seem oblivious to the reality that the population of that territory contains large number and almost all Hindus, Buddhists and Sikhs who live in Indian control. Kashmir, as well as a sizable proportion of Muslims living there. So specifically among non-Kashmir Muslim groups. So and whose fundamental allegiance is to India. And the three contending similar claims to Kashmir mirror images of each other in one important sense. Uh, that's all from me. Thank you.
Name is NURSALSABILA binti Muhammad SUKRI and my metric number is 046388. So as for the next point, which is dimension 1, the New Delhi Islamabad axis. So this dimension 1 had been looked as an alternative approach to Kashmir that symbolized as one of the somewhat three strands of the peace process in Northern Ireland. So we can see that this dimension 1 had been specifically and had been focused in broad the meaning of the establishment of the permanent intergovernmental conference between India and Pakistan. So the purpose of this intergovernmental conference is in order to promote the harmonious and the mutually beneficial development of the relationship between India and Pakistan. So this conference is being focusing on Kashmir issue, and it must be treated as the core issue between both countries. To add on, it is important for this Kashmir issue being regarded as priority to ensure the successful agenda of this regional cooperation between Kashmir and Pakistan, between India and Pakistan. So, moreover, we can see that in order to show the commitment of India government and Pakistan government in improving their relation is to involve the prime ministers, the defense ministers, the chiefs of both countries in this conference. So it can be said that both government, which is the India government and the Pakistan government, have been committed in addressing this issue, especially this Kashmir dispute, which they had opted and they had chose to be cooperative between each other rather than to have a conflict.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is NURAQILAH binti RAHIMEE. My metric number 047947. Okay, as for my part, I will discuss regarding the dimension to peace process, in which can be divided into two parts, which is the New Delhi Srinagar and also Islamabad Muzaffarabad. So actually, this dimension to peace process is roughly equivalent and has similar objective to the Northern Ireland peace process, where the Northern Ireland peace process objective is to create a devolved government in Ulster with parity representation and power sharing between the unionist and nationalist communities, and in which it followed the principle that major political parties on both sides of the divide will participate in cooperatively running the autonomous institution. Okay, as for the Kashmir conflict, actually the equivalent objective in Kashmir would be the gradual, incremental normalizations of politics within Kashmir in both Indian and Pakistani control zones, and the devising and implementation of political frameworks which can foster a degree of internal accommodation and cooperation between the representative of communities holding radically different basic political alliances. So, as in the dimension to peace process, the conception that the zones of Kashmir under de facto Indian sovereignty and de facto Pakistani sovereignty should be treated as separate entities for the purpose of this dimension to peace process, which is known as the New Delhi Srinagar and Islamabad and Muzaffarabad axis. So it means under dimension to peace process, it can be said that dimension to peace process is equal to every India as well as Pakistan, in which there are divided zone which divided zone in Kashmir, which is under the Indian sovereignty, and there is a zone in Kashmir which is under the Pakistan sovereignty. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Siti Binti ABDUL Halim. My metric number 047946. So today I'm going to explain about the dimension 3 of the Srinagar-Muzaffarabad axis. So the great social diversity of Kashmir and the sharply conflicting basic political allegiance of different sectors of its population means that a single independent state encompassing the pre-1947 borders would most probably not be viable, even if India and Pakistan were to allow it. But that does not mean that what was the pre-1947 princely state should be condemned in perpetuity to the opposite extreme, which is being divided by an iron curtain, which is one of the most heavily militarized borders in the world. So, this would be the Srinagar-Muzaffarabad axis, the dimension 3 of the peace process in Kashmir and the subcontinent. Dimension 3 roughly corresponds to strand 2 of the Northern Ireland peace process, which is the most contentious element of the three-track approach to peace building. So, under the strand 2 of the Good Friday Agreement, a North-South Ministerial Council is to be established as the institutional expression of cross-border cooperation between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So this dimension 3 will also serve as a second and even more important purpose. A basic aim of Pakistan's Kashmir policy has always been to secure some sort of say, however indirect, in the affairs of the Indian-controlled 2/3 of Kashmir, especially in the valley. So, the regional institutions of cross-border cooperation linking Srinagar to Muzaffarabad would give the part of Kashmir which is under the de facto Pakistani sovereignty an institutionalized role, even if it is limited in the part of Kashmir which is under the de facto of Indian sovereignty.
My name is NURULSUFIZA JAMALUDDIN and my metric number is 046360. So, as a conclusion, the Kashmir conflict's current direction can best be understood in the light of nationalism and state building that followed the end of British colonial rule. Domestic factors, including the imperative of regime legitimacy and consolidation, remain important influences in both countries, which are Indian and Pakistani. Evaluation of the failure and of past and present Indian and Pakistani approaches suggests caution about any strictly bilateral process that disregards the regional and international dimensions of the crisis, nor is any solution viable that ignores the sense of historical unity that underlies the social and religious diversity across the current line of control LOC, dividing the former Dogra kingdom into Indian and Pakistani administered Kashmir. So that's all. Thank you.